FromSoftware undoubtedly has some of the best boss fights in their catalog of games, and after I came across Thorgy Arcade's build a roster videos, I had an idea that, to my knowledge, hasn't been mentioned anywhere else. What if FromSoftware used bosses from across their games to make a fighting game? I know this isn't something FromSoftware would ever do, but I can't help but get hyped at the idea of it. FromSoftware has so many iconic bosses with their own attack patterns and unique abilities. It's not hard to imagine how some of these characters could translate into a fighting game setting. Just to make myself clear, I'm by no means a fighting game expert. Most of my experience comes from Mortal Kombat, which I've been playing ever since MK vs DC. And I'm also not a game developer, so these are just my thoughts as someone who's a casual player of both fighting games and FromSoftware. There would probably be issues with hitboxes due to how massive some of these characters are, but this is all just hypothetical. In terms of what type of fighting game this could be, there's a few different options. It could be 2D, 3D, or a platform fighter like Multiverses or Smash Bros. For the sake of simplicity, let's say it's a 3D fighting game since it feels the most fitting for the attacks these bosses have. In terms of how I think this game would play, I think it's fair to assume that it would be pretty fast-paced and have a lot of rushdown characters. There would be a meter burn system that allows characters to enhance their special attacks or be saved up for an ultimate attack. For this game, let's say there's two types of ultimates depending on who you're playing as. One would be a passive effect that gives a character either new attacks or a temporary buff, and the other would be a huge cinematic attack that does a good chunk of damage. Let's call this mechanic their phase 2, as a nod to the fact that most of these characters have more than one phase in their boss fights. While a good chunk of bosses are basically guys in armor wielding bladed weapons, I tried to come up with a roster of characters that still feels varied from each other. I also took into consideration the popularity of certain bosses to include them in the roster. In this video, I'll go over which characters I would like to see in a FromSoftware fighting game, as well as stages and DLC fighters. So if there's any characters you think are missing, chances are they might be in the DLC segment of this video. And just a heads up, I don't plan on including bosses from Demon's Souls since none of them felt like they could bring anything unique to the roster. So my apologies to anyone who wanted Demon's Souls representation in the roster. Anyway, let's begin. Starting with Dark Souls 1, we have the iconic duo from Anno Orlando, Ornstein and Smo. Aside from Artorias, these two are probably the first bosses that come to mind when you think of Dark Souls 1, so it makes sense for them to be in a FromSoftware fighting game. These two would function as separate characters since they both have their own unique styles of combat. Ornstein is lighter and much faster, while Smo has an imposing size and is a slow heavy hitter. Ornstein's moveset would utilize his speed and agility. To showcase his speed, one of his special attacks could be a long-range dash that closes the distance between him and the opponent. He also has a projectile in the form of a lightning spear. His normal combos would consist of multi-hit sweeps and thrusts from his spear, as well as jumping attacks. Ornstein can serve as a rushdown character that's easy for new players to start with. Smo would be the opposite, as he's one of the more slower characters on the roster. Smo's attacks make up for this by having a wide range for his hammer swings, but at the expense of being much slower. His specials would include his jumping slam and the charge that leads into a follow-up swing. Ornstein's phase 2 ultimate would be him turning into Super Ornstein, which makes him turn giant for a brief period of time. Then Smo's phase 2 will make his hammer electrified for extra damage in his normal attacks, as well as giving him the bonsai drop. Ornstein and Smo would be drastically different from each other and provide different playstyles to choose from. Next on the list is the walking berserk reference himself, Knight Artorias. It was probably obvious he was going to be in the roster due to how popular he is among the fandom. Despite having a broken arm, Artorias would still be a formidable fighter in this game. Gameplay-wise, I'd say Artorias would be like a slower version of Ornstein while still having aspects of a rushdown and mix-up character. His normal combos would consist of heavy swings and overheads from his greatsword. Artorias also throws Essence of the Abyss like it's pocket sand.
Pocket sand!
Meter burning this could leave the Abyss on the ground ground and damage opponents that stand over it. Part of his moveset would be his powerful jump attacks, like the somersault slam, which can be done 3 times if enhanced, and the diving slam attack. But there's an interesting mechanic to his playstyle that gives him an edge over other characters. Artorias can literally dodge, but this would need a cooldown so it can't be spammed over and over again. Artorias' phase 2 would be him summoning the Power of the Abyss, starting off as an AoE attack but giving a temporary strength boost and damage reduction. He would be an aggressive character to play as, and one that can keep pressure on his opponents. Artorias is definitely a character I can see a lot of people choosing to main. As a character, the Flexile Sentry could be pretty interesting from a gameplay perspective. Its 2 bodies conjoined together, both wielding different weapons. One with swords, the other with spiked batons. Just imagine the combos he would have by combining both weapon types into his strings. This would be the perfect example of a mix-up character since the opponent will have to guess which side will attack first. We could have the sword side specialize in mediums and lows, while the baton side mainly does overheads. The Flexile Sentry would probably have some of the more unique looking combos due to his physicality. Then there's the question of what his phase 2 would be since he doesn't have a major moveset change in the original fight. My best guess is he could do a frenzy of attacks using both of his weapons in one big combo. Every fighting game needs to have the one obscure character on the roster, and I think this guy fits the bill for that. My favorite boss of Dark Souls 2 would have a lot more to offer gameplay-wise. The Fume Knight dual wields a straight sword alongside the Fume Ultra Greatsword. He's able to use them both in his combos, using fast swipes with his normal sword before ending with a swing or a slam from his greatsword. Plus, the Fume Knight has a lunge attack that reaches farther than you would expect. Despite being kind of a tanky character, that doesn't really affect his attack speed. You can probably guess what his phase 2 ultimate will be. He empowers the Fume Ultra Greatsword, which changes some of his normal combos. Now that he's two-handing the greatsword, these strings will hit much harder. Fume Knight's phase 2 will give him access to new attacks, like the sweep that turns his weapon into a flamethrower, and the one where he sends out these fireballs that fly through the arena. After a brief period of time, Fume Knight will revert back to dual wielding and lose the extra attacks until he can activate his phase 2 again. I could see him being a really fun character to play, and he would definitely be one of the first I start training with. Up next is Sir Alon, the Samurai of Dark Souls 2. Having a huge katana as his weapon, Alon's basic attacks consist of normal slashes, some of which ending with a thrust. His specials would include the downward stab and his charging slice attack. If the player charges up the dash longer, it increases their range. Alon can also send out a dark wave projectile, but this leaves him open to be punished. He can also perform a parry that can lead to a riposte attack, but in my experience, he's never done this. Similar to Artorias, Alon can sidestep or jump backwards to maintain distance from the opponent. Alon's phase 2 attack would be the life drain stab. His katana glows before impaling the opponent and draining a portion of their health. This gives his sword a red aura, and for this game we can have this be a temporary damage boost for his normal attacks and the dark wave projectile. Given the type of characters that will be in this game, Sir Alon would be fairly balanced but also quite strong depending on the situation. The last Dark Souls 2 boss for the main roster is the Burnt Ivory King. Starting with this guy, be sure to expect more final bosses to be playable characters in the roster. So what would the moveset be like for the boss who has arguably one of the sickest entrances in the whole trilogy? You can probably tell from my footage that a lot of his basic attacks consist of a backhand swing, so that's probably how his combos will look like. The Burnt Ivory King can also perform air attacks like a thrust and horizontal slice. One of his specials would also include a backhand charge that ends with a follow-up attack. His phase 2 ultimate has the Ivory King imbue his sword with magic to increase the range for all of his normal and special attacks. Even though in his boss fight his range stays the same during phase 2, let's say for this game that it does increase. In addition to the increased range, he gains access to a grab attack that impales the opponent, as well as an AoE that summons crystals around him. His phase 2 will also change the charging attack to become a thrust instead of a backhand swing. Just like the other ultimates that have been discussed so far, this will run out after a brief period of time. The Burnt Ivory King has a pretty useful phase 2, so he might be a surprise choice for some players to go online with. We made it to Dark Souls 3, and it only makes sense for a Lord of Cinder to be on the list, that being the Abyss Watcher. Going forward, explaining how each character plays will be more in-depth since the bosses of Dark Souls 1 and 2 don't really have complex movesets. Taking inspiration from the boss fight, this character would have an interesting gimmick. He has the ability to summon another Watcher to land a single attack onto the opponent. There would be a few variations of this. These would include the jumping slam, the slide attack, and the uppercut swing. Basically, we're making the Abyss Watcher into a setup character. Since you'll be able to attack after calling in the assist, there could be some serious combo potential here. The Abyss Watcher's combos would be fairly standard, having your basic swings, overheads, and thrust attacks. His combos will also utilize the smaller blade he has in his offhand. But when he becomes a Lord of Cinder in his Phase 2, his moveset is now improved. The Abyss Watcher's normal attacks will now leave a fire trail, which will add extra hits to his combos or catch the opponent if they're not far enough away. The slide attack can be meter burned to have the follow-up backswing, and meter burned again to get the explosion slam at the end. The caveat to his Phase 2 is that he can no longer call in the assist, but he can once his Phase 2 runs out. Personally, I think the Abyss Watcher has one of the more fun movesets on the roster. From what I've noticed, a lot of people still praise Champion Gundyr as one of the better fights in Dark Souls 3, so it only made sense to include him. And he's one of the few bosses that can straight up combo you if you're unlucky. As you all know from his boss fight, Champion Gundyr's moveset is pure aggression. Using a halberd, his attack patterns consist of sweeps, thrusts, overhead slams, and uppercuts, and he switches between them seamlessly. He also incorporates attacks like punches, kicks, and shoulder bashes into his combos. Along with that, Gundyr has an air slam which will connect if the opponent is already knocked down. His only other special attack would be him stabbing the halberd into the ground and sending rocks at you as a projectile. When activating his ultimate, his eyes will glow red and go straight into the charge attack just like in the boss fight. In Dark Souls 3, this basically makes him way more aggressive, so in this game his Phase 2 will increase the speed of his normal attacks, but the damage will stay the same. I think Gundyr just getting a speed boost is good enough, since he already makes for a strong rushdown character to begin with. Next up is Dragon Slayer Armor. You might think at first glance that Dragon Slayer Armor would be more of a brute force character, but he's surprisingly agile. He constantly switches between the Great Axe and the shield during combos. In some combos, he only uses the Great Axe, and with others, he uses just the shield. The Great Shield works just as well defensively as it does on offense. The shield can be used by itself, as a combo ender, or as a counter if the opponent strikes it. One of his special moves would be the lunge attack with the Great Axe, but when you meter burn this, it gives an additional follow-up with the Great Shield. This will catch the opponent off guard if they're not expecting the player to use their meter. Of course, we can't leave out the weapon art for the Great Axe, where it slams down a blast of electricity. There would be a high risk, high reward factor to this attack since it will have a cooldown along with a brief starting animation. Probably my favorite aspect of Dragon Slayer Armor's moveset is the stance. He two-hands the Great Axe and can perform one of 3 different attacks. He can either drag it across the ground for an upward swing, unleash a strong but quick horizontal slash, or send out a wind projectile. His Phase 2 attack would be just like in the boss fight, where the Pilgrim Butterflies will rain down projectiles from off screen for a few seconds. Dragon Slayer Armor would be another solid combination of a mix-up and rushdown character thanks to his weapons and moveset. It's been a while since we've had a tanky character in the roster, so who else better to include than the Nameless King? I always felt that his attack pattern was much slower than the other bosses of Dark Souls 3, and this fighting game needs more brute force characters. In terms of normal attacks, the Nameless King doesn't really have much, so he would rely mainly on projectiles. In close range, he has horizontal swings, overheads, and thrust attacks. His special moves would utilize the lightning attacks, either by slamming a bolt into the ground or with a stomp that causes an AoE blast. The Nameless King also doesn't even need lightning, since he can use the spear to send air shockwaves horizontally and vertically. I thought about including his ability to fly in his moveset, but I can't help but feel that would make it a bit too hard for the opponent to hit him. For his Phase 2 ultimate, I felt like making it a cinematic that combines 2 attacks from his boss fight. Upon activation, he raises the spear before slamming it down on the opponent. Regardless if the first hit doesn't land, the Nameless King will then charge up and call down a lightning strike on top of them. His moveset in Dark Souls 3 is kinda limited, so this is the best I could come up with. The Nameless King would essentially be a tank with zoning mechanics, though I think his lightning and ranged attacks will make up for his lack of close range combos.
It is only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
This far into the roster, we have our first female character in the game, Sister Frida, and also the first to have a scythe as their main weapon, so that's pretty cool. Her move list is straightforward. She has 2 to 3 hit swings with her scythe along with some special attacks. One combo has her swing once, leave an ice trail, and do a final slam, which looks really sick. And as another first for the roster, Frida has a move where she can turn invisible like she's Reptile from Mortal Kombat. The last of her special moves is a stance she does, dragging her scythe on the ground before leading into an upward slice. Since Frida has a 3-phase boss fight, we're gonna borrow attacks from the 3rd phase for her ultimate. Her ultimate has her become Black Flame Frida. While in this state, her moveset will be completely different. Upon activation, Frida will automatically perform the Black Flame Slam that she does in her boss fight. Now wielding a second scythe, Frida can do multi-hit combos where she utilizes them both. She can still leave ice trails that will give the opponent frostbite if they stand on it long enough, but now she can also use Black Flame attacks. One of these attacks is her sending a Black Flame trail towards the opponent, and a second one if she enhances it. The normal ice trail attack can now be enhanced as well, leaving 2 trails at once and even more if enhanced again. It goes without question that her phase 2 would be temporary, since it would be too broken to let her stay like this for the rest of the match. Sister Frida would be a decent character to use. Her default moveset is solid and is even better with her phase 2. We all probably knew Gale was going to be on the base roster. He has arguably one of the best fights in the trilogy and is the last bit of content for Dark Souls as a whole, unless FromSoftware decides to make Dark Souls 4 in the future. Like Sister Frida, Gale is another 3-phase boss fight, so his ultimate will have attacks from both his 2nd and 3rd phases. Starting with his default moveset, Gale starts out on all 4s and attacks like a wild animal. His normal attacks are made up of horizontal swings, some of which give him distance from the opponent in the middle of his combos. Gale's longest combo in his default moveset is a 3-hit slam from the greatsword, while the rest are mainly 2 hits. At first, he only has 2 special attacks, one where he swings his sword 4 times before landing a final slam, and one where he jumps backwards before lunging forward to impale the opponent. Gale's starting moveset is kinda limited, but once he activates his ultimate, it's almost as if he's a completely different character. When Gale's phase 2 is activated, an explosion of souls will erupt in a massive AoE attack. Now standing upwards, Gale has access to more special attacks. One of them is a repeater crossbow that can be used by itself or as part of his combos. He also has a projectile where he throws a set of rings that return back and hit the opponent from behind. Gale's normal attacks are different as well. They now utilize his cape by giving each of his swings a second hit, just like the Abyss Watcher's phase 2. Other attacks involving his cape are this spinning attack and the one where he jumps back and launches towards the opponent. The spinning attack can also be enhanced twice so that Gale has 2 additional strikes. One of his combos has to be the one where Gale attacks before firing his crossbow in midair and slamming back down. It looks so badass and it would be a war crime not to have it in the moveset. I chose not to include the lightning as a passive effect since I think Gale's ultimate makes him strong enough already. I was also debating whether his ultimate should be permanent for the rest of the match, but I felt like that would be too broken with how much of a brick shithouse Gale becomes in his phase 2. But given that he might be the last Dark Souls boss we'll ever get, it's only fitting that he's a powerful character on the roster.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
In this fighting game, it only makes sense for Bloodborne to get some representation, because FromSoftware won't do that anytime soon. The first Bloodborne boss on the roster is Father Gascoigne. Since Bloodborne has mechanics that other Souls games don't have, these characters will showcase that in their gameplay. These mechanics are the weapon switch and the pistol parry. For starters, Gascoigne starts out with the Hunter Axe and the blunderbuss in his offhand, but the Hunter Axe can be switched to a two-handed version that changes the player's attack pattern. Seeing this mechanic in a fighting game setting would be pretty interesting since weapon switches can be done mid-combo. And the pistol would work similarly to how they are in Bloodborne, landing a shot at the last second to leave an enemy open for attack. But to limit how much this can be done, we'll give these characters a single shot before they have to manually reload. This will be signified by an ammo counter in the corner of the screen. I got this idea from how Aaron Black's rifle works in Mortal Kombat 11. If the player feels like taking the risk, they can spend both bars of their meter and put 2 extra bullets into the Hunter pistol, which will add more combo and pressure potential. In terms of how Gascoigne would play, he has different combos depending on which weapon he has equipped. When using the short Hunter Axe, he has basic slashes and overheads. If the player switches to the two-handed version, then Gascoigne will have new normal attacks and specials. These include a jumping slam and a heavier version of the overhead. In both weapon modes, Gascoigne has a roll that can be used to lead into a thrust or a surprise pistol shot. Another special is a sweep that can be charged up. If Gascoigne does the input without holding it, he only performs one sweep. But if the input is held down, it will turn into a spinning sweep that hits more than once. It's important to mention that between both weapon modes, Gascoigne can use the blunderbuss as an ender to most of his strings, but he still has to reload even if he misses a shot. Moving on to his Phase 2 ultimate, this will give him a temporary boost in speed and aggression. Gascoigne will enter his beast form, which changes his moveset yet again. His normal attacks are now quick swipes with his claws, and now he has access to specials like the overhead smash and the jumping dive bomb. The enemy player will need to time their attacks carefully due to how fast Gascoigne is in this state. Like other characters, his Phase 2 will run out and revert him back to his base form after a short period of time. Gascoigne would be a challenging character to learn due to how much his moveset can change during the fight, as well as knowing how to use the blunderbuss effectively.
Should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. From your wild curiosity.
We already have Sister Frieda on the roster, so we need to include the boss fight that inspired her in the first place. Once again, Lady Maria is a 3-phase boss fight, so you should know the drill by now. Much like Gascoigne, she has the option to switch weapon modes for her Rakuyo. It starts off as a dual-wielding form, which can turn into a double-sided blade. With the dual-wield Rakuyo, Maria can perform diagonal slashes, multi-hit thrusts, and cross-sword strikes. She can also use the Evelyn pistol, but only when the twin-blade mode is active. If a player parries the opponent with the Evelyn, they can do Maria's visceral attack for extra damage. No matter which weapon Maria uses, her playstyle centers around attacking quickly and not giving the opponent time to breathe. This becomes more evident as the player can perform a temporary buff that can be used only once per match. Maria will use the Rakuyo to impale herself and activate a blood boost to her moveset. Her combo strings will now leave a blood trail, giving them additional strikes. When using the twin blade mode, Maria can do a projectile that has some serious range and can be enhanced to have a blood slash as a follow-up. Another attack is an overhead slam that leads into a small blood explosion. Her moveset becomes even stronger when she activates her ultimate, where Lady Maria basically becomes a Lord of Cinder. In addition to the blood buff, her normal attacks and specials will now leave a fire trail. This includes the projectile, the blood slash, and the overhead strike. The blood and fire buff would make for one of the strongest Phase 2 ultimates in the roster, which is why we'll have it so Maria can only activate her Phase 2 if the player has the blood buff active. Since the blood buff can only be used once the entire match, they could potentially lose the ability to use her ultimate. I think that's a fair enough trade-off for how strong her ultimate is. But if any player decides to choose Lady Maria as their main, it's safe to say they're using one of the best characters available.
Oh, it doesn't matter. to the hunters, help her to clean up after these sons and messes. Tonight, Gammon joins the hunt.
Garamond the First Hunter is the last Bloodborne character for the main roster. Just like Gascoigne and Lady Maria, he has access to a firearm and the ability to switch weapon modes. Unlike the last two characters, Garamond can't use the blunderbuss unless he switches to the burial sword. His starting weapon mode is a scythe, and most of his combo strings have slow startups. Using the scythe, there's an attack that hooks the opponent closer for a follow-up. One of the specials in this mode is a charge where he advances forward before slamming down. Switching to the burial sword, Garamond can attack more quickly and utilize longer combo strings. These combos also let him use the blunderbuss as a combo ender, and the shots have a wide spread. Garamond's ultimate plays a cutscene where he looks up at the moon just like in his boss fight. A huge AoE blast will be activated and damage the opponent if they're close enough, and this pretty much gives him an Ultra Instinct aura. This will make him more agile in combat. His combos are now faster and he can now use a Hunter Pistol separate from the blunderbuss. The new Hunter Pistol fires a single precise shot instead of a spread, which causes more damage and will be noticeably easier to hit the opponent. With how much stronger this Hunter Pistol is, he has a limited number of shots before the ultimate runs out. The Phase 2 also makes Garamond more agile in both of his weapon modes, meaning he'll be faster even when using the scythe. Garamond has a well-rounded moveset for both of his weapons, and some players might find him to be more accessible than Gascoigne and Lady Maria.
なるほどな。貴様を殺しきらぬ限り、流因を我が手にはできぬ。
少しは成長しておるようだな。やろうか。狼よ。
わしはこのアシナをよみがえらせねばならぬ。故に赤炉、お主を斬るぞ。
pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition. Have it writ upon thy meager grave. Felled by King Morgoth, last of all kings.
I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
And here you'd come, to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord.
stripped of the grace of gold, shall all meet death.